Hi everyone, welcome to the live session today. We're doing another round of profile evaluations today, so thank you all for joining. I see a lot of people in the waiting line. Thanks so much. And a lot of people are like, when is the session starting? We're just like a couple minutes late. I mean, that happens, it's a Sunday. I'm here with Sam. I guess you know who I am. My name is Souvik. I'm a second year MBA student. I should stop saying that. I'm a Ross alum. I graduated earlier this week, and it was on Zoom, so it was very uneventful. I'm here with Sam today. Sam also graduated with me. He was my roommate in Michigan. Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, Sam from Michigan, recent alum, go blue, and hopefully going full-time to Microsoft in the summer.
Awesome. So the format will stay largely similar from yesterday, right? So we're going to look at two different profiles, and then we're going to take some questions, right? Nishan, thank you so much for your questions. Hold your horses. We will get to them. I promise yours will be the first one that we get to. But meanwhile, everybody else, feel free to post a little blurb of your profile in the chat, and we will get to those. I would recommend doing a full profile in one chat. If you break it up in multiples, it's hard for me to know when your profile starts and when it ends. So please do that. So just a quick disclaimer before we jump into today's video. So we are doing profile evaluations. Just please know that we are not experts. Nobody really is. Nobody is an admission expert. Nobody can tell you which school you can get into and which school you cannot get into. What I can offer is sort of my experience from GMAT Club, being around the forums for so long, looking at people succeeding and getting into schools. And the other thing that helps Sam and me, that we have seen a bunch of business school students in our tenure at Ross and other schools. So we sort of have some idea of how things work, what business schools likes and what business schools don't like. So with that said, let's jump into the first profile. I tried to keep our profiles as different as possible. So let's just jump into the first one. Our first profile, Sam. Apologies if it's a little bit hard to read. I tried to cram in as much information as I could. I'm going to read it out for most people out there who can't read it, but tune your YouTube playback to 720p, which will make it clear. So Brazilian male, 29 years old, 700 GMAT, pretty balanced score, I would say, 49 Q, 37 verbal. Considering retake to get a 720 plus. The top university in Latin America, economics major, average performance, mainly due to having done internships and CFA levels. That's great. He has 5 years of work experiences other than internships. For full time, he worked for a year and a half in the largest investment bank in Latin America in Sao Paulo, Brazil. 1.5 years as an investment banking analyst at a global boutique bank. 2 years in one of the largest independent asset manager in LATAM with over $10 billion in assets in Santiago. Okay, so more investment banking things, equity and debt, buy side, good stuff. In others, he was also an English teacher in a low-income community in Sao Paulo for 2.5 years. It's a Brazilian NGO and has done more leadership roles within that NGO. He also has a cleared CFA, so he's also a grader for a CFA research thing. Knows fluent English and Spanish and Portuguese native. In terms of goals, wants to go back to Brazil after the MBA, and he wants that emerging markets exposure and stuff like that, and wants to move to fintech as a part of the banking financial industry transformation within Brazil. Okay, so that's a lot of information to unpack. I'm going to hand it over to you, Sam. Why don't you start with what do you think, and then I'll chime in. But overall, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, it looks really good. Great work experience. Love the others section. I think it's from an underrepresented demographic. So the GMAT score is not bad. If you get 720, definitely would be probably in consideration for a lot of the top schools.
Right.
So I think this is a fairly strong profile because you're definitely in an underrepresented demographic.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Latin America in general, I think if you consider the whole of Latin America as a demography, then Brazil is probably overrepresented within that. I think most of the Latin Americans come from either Brazil or Colombia, and then you have some other smaller Latin American countries. So I think with that said, I think you definitely have opportunities to stand out because of your experiences. I also like the fact that he wants to retake the GMAT and get a 720 plus. I think that'll be helpful. I will say though, Latin America has generally Latin American admits tend to have lower GMAT scores than the rest of the school. So the so the recs may be a little bit less stringent for you, but I think to be on the safe side, I think it makes sense to have a 720 or above, which I think is totally doable. I think you have a quantity background. I think your quant and verbal score are very balanced. So I think 1 point above both of them will get you to a 720. So I think that's a really good score. I would say though, like one thing that you haven't mentioned is which schools you want to get into, right? So I would say pick schools that are closer to your goals. If you want to go back to Brazil, I would look at international schools too, because international schools are just better at placing internationally, and there are a lot of good schools in Spain that might serve your purpose if you want to eventually end up in Brazil, and your language skills might also be very helpful there. I would also look at, in terms of American schools, I don't know if you want to work in the US a little bit before you go back to Brazil, but I have a feeling it will be only helpful if you have some investment banking experience within the US. It sort of adds that stamp of approval and that credibility to your overall resume. So, in that sense, I would recommend schools in the East Coast. I would recommend schools like Columbia, Stern, maybe Wharton, Booth. So those are the schools that I would feel comfortable recommending, and I would also hedge your bets by applying to a school like Ross and maybe Kellogg. Again, Kellogg and Ross are not like really hedging, but it's practically a numbers game after a point. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I think so. I would focus primarily on the coast, New York, and also the West Coast, because I think this profile wants to get into fintech as well. So if you want to spend a little time in America, so Haas
Yeah.
would be a great number one, and then with schools like UCLA or USC as backups. But I think Ross is actually a strong school as a hedge for either fintech or for to New York or for some stuff with credit cards or digital payments. Like we know a lot of classmates that got into that stuff, and they come pretty heavy for Ross recruits.
Right. No, that makes sense. So that's sort of my feedback. I would say though, like one thing that we don't discuss in these videos with profile evaluations is that how you really present yourself to the adcom, and I think that's the content of our next video. We are going to look at like what does a really good resume look like, and what does a really good essay looks like. So we're going to take a look at that. So stay tuned for those things. So we will get to that next weekend. So and Sam will be here for those too if we pester him enough. Okay, so we're going to move to the next profile. So our next profile comes from Africa. So I'm going to read it out for everybody else and for you, Sam, and then we can jump into that. So 32-year-old African American male, first generation college grad student, um, general management. That's what he wants to do. Programs of interest: Tuck, Darden, Ross, Haas, Johnson, Stern, Yale. Okay, all schools basically. So good. The GMAT, September 2019. I'm not really sure what that means, but I hope you have your GMAT settled. Undergrad, did 2 years of community college where I got a 3.5 GPA before transferring to an Ivy where I graduated with 2.67. Okay. A lot of details. Transferred in the mathematics major. Okay, fine. You did quant scores, but you had some issues because you were also working full time to support your family and yourself back home. Okay. Work experience. He has 9 years of work experience. The first 3 were spent in France, 2 years in a blue chip where he completed a finance rotation program and then transitioned to sales where he spent 2.5 years in another blue chip and a sales leadership rotation. Moved to a startup where he was an independent consultant and then moved to the current role. Last 3 years in a Fortune 500 tech company where he's a top performer. He also co-founded a construction company which is not functioning right now, where he managed sales marketing. Despite inconsistent staffing, he still managed to generate about $275,000 in sales in his first year, decided to let the business go when his co-founder's wife got sick, too much to manage on my own with my current job. Okay, that makes sense. Sam has some founder pains too, so we can ask him about that. In terms of extracurricular, served as an officer active member of a nationwide not-for-profit multiracial organization that focuses on the enhancement of economic educational opportunities for African Americans. I've also spent the last 3 years coaching chess at local schools and community centers throughout my city. What are some things I could do to increase my chances of getting into a preferred program? What is the lowest GMAT I should accept for a good shot? Which programs are more forgiving? All right, I get the gist. Okay, makes sense. I'm going to go first on this one because I keep throwing Sam under the bus. So I think overall, very good profile, right? I think overall, I think you're very, very strong. The international profiles are a nice touch. Entrepreneurial experience is a nice touch, and your rationale for letting go of that, I think that's totally valid. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that issue. I don't mean wife getting sick, but also just things coming in the way and things happen and that you don't anticipate. It's better to have an entrepreneurial failure story than not have it at all. So I know Sam milked his entrepreneurial failure story in all of his interviews, and that was helpful. I think the other thing that I like here a lot is that your school selection is very good. I think your school selection is a mix of most schools, which, by the way, people don't do when they are like just starting out in thinking about schools. So I think that's really good as well. I would say you have a decent shot in all your schools, considering you score a 720-ish GMAT. I think that's the GMAT that I'd feel comfortable with all of these schools. But I would say, with the caveat, though, I think with a 700 GMAT even, I think you can get into some of the schools that you mentioned here, like Macomb, Stepper, UNC. I think even with a 700 or a 680 GMAT, I think it would be achievable. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this profile. I mean, if I was an admin person, this profile with Gemma, I'm interested, and I'd be interested to talk to this person and really kind of see the more of the why through the thread, because it's just a very interesting profile for a lot of the admissions and also for job later on. I think if the person scores right in that GMAT range that you said, all these schools are very doable. And if you get higher, then sky's the limit. I really like this profile. It stands out, and not only because it's a bit of an underrepresented demographic, but just the kind of the twists and turns and the ability to be honest about some things that didn't go right or planned, and then to kind of get back on the horse and be successful. Like it.
Yeah, no, I agree with most of that stuff, and I think there are some very unique elements to this profile. Like the international experience is a really nice touch. The entrepreneurial stuff is also very nice. So overall, I think this is very good. I think the only thing that I would maybe focus on is how you sort of differentiate yourself within the African American community. I think you have already done that with several elements of your experience. I think that's pretty awesome. But I would also like to see you taking advantage of a lot of different programs for URM stuff. So consortium is one of them. So I would leverage some of those programs to like accelerate some of your chances.
Yes, I agree. I think, and the other thing that I would recommend, I had a lot of twists and turns myself in my profile, and you don't want to throw the whole kitchen sink at adcoms when you're writing your essays. So really find that
Yeah,
nice thread where you're zooming in on amount of stuff, zooming out. But I really like this would be this is a great profile because it's very unique and I like it. Yeah, but get hooked up with consortium. I think that would help this person a lot.
right. Uh, so we're pretty much our profiles. I'm gonna stop the screen share and then jump into some of the comments. Yeah. So Sam, just quick check on AV. Do you think
It's a choppy now for some reason.
Yeah, I think you sort of had some issue there too. I could, yeah, not sure. Okay, I'm gonna take a few seconds just to diagnose it. I'm gonna give you a profile to talk about till then. We are gonna start with, well, Nishant, like we promised. So for ISB YLP, by the way, Sam, YLP is like a HBS 2+2 program, right? Uh, okay, so significant experience, wrote book, and self-published it. Okay, so okay, Nishant, I think you have a lot to go for yourself, but I really don't know your GMAT score and all of that. I think those play a big role when you're looking at YLP programs, right? So I would focus on the academics bit because I think that becomes more important in most of the deferred programs in all business schools. So I would really go hard on that. Okay. Question. All right, Sam. This one's for you. 8 years of work experience as a consultant working in the finance and industry, particularly mutual and hedge funds. I have NGO experience of 2 years. I'm aiming for a score of 740, 750 on the GMAT. What are my chances of getting into the business school? Getting into top business school?
I mean, sounds like great work experience, great extracurricular nonprofit stuff. If you get a 740, it seems like if you're from India, unfortunately, that is low. That's the really hard. I mean, it's a great score. I think, unfortunately, you're going to have to really shoot for 750, 760. And that's, it kind of hurts me to say that because 740 is an awesome score. It's higher than the score I got.
Yeah, but I do think for Indian female, the bar is like at 730. I think that's the sweet spot. But still,
Okay.
like Sam's like you still have to get that 730, 740 to be very comfortable. But if you have that score, though, I think your consulting experiences will only help you. I mean, it'll definitely get you there.
But with this, I think with this profile, you're going to want to apply across the board at the top 12 because you just don't know where you're going to fall. And
Yeah.
like you, Souvik, many of our friends, like Ross was the one that it fell on. And Ross is a really good school. but I know our friends, they were, shooting for top 5 as well. So, I would apply across the board to, and see where it falls.
Awesome. So moving on. Okay. First of all, I apologize for some of the video challenges that we are having, but hopefully the audio is clear and you can hear us. We have someone from Russia. That's pretty awesome. Welcome, Natalia. Uh, Female Russian, 34 years old, 11 years in finance, executive or entrepreneurial MBA, word GMAT, good for full ride and with school is the best. So executive MBA is tricky because most of those executive MBA programs don't have recruitment built in, right? So those are mostly for like mid-level or senior mid-level managers, sort of get a leg up on their career track in their own companies. And most of them end up being sponsored by their companies. So that's something to think about, right? Like it's hard to get a full ride because executive MBAs are basically how a lot of MBA programs make their money, because most companies are okay paying an obscene amount. So I would research on that. I would also expand to things like a weekend MBA or a part-time MBA for you if you're looking at that opportunity. And there are multiple scholarships available. Kellogg has a great part-time program. Ross has a good weekend and part-time programs. I think Booth has a part-time program that's very well known. Haas has probably one of the best weekend programs. So those are the programs that I would look at. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're shooting, obviously the higher the better. I think you want to get over 700 for this demographic, which is underrepresented for sure. So 700 or higher, and you're doing really good. You push it to 720 or higher, and you can feel very confident.
Sorry, I think I disappeared for a second. I'm back. Sam, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
I gotcha.
So, quick questions around COVID and the current situation. Many colleges have waived GMAT as a criteria. How do you view this with respect to the position taken by those schools? I think it's hard to say, to be honest. Like right now, the waiving the GMAT is a very temporary thing, right? Like a lot of schools are doing that so that people can apply without having to take the GMAT or without like this whole online GMAT circus. By the way, we have a lot of like GMAT online and like what does these all mean? That kind of content on our YouTube channel. So feel free to take a look at that. So I would say take the GMAT if you can. Take the GMAT online. I think it's totally doable. I explained this in my previous video. So, and I felt that it wasn't as difficult as people were, thinking. So I would be comfortable with that. And then if you don't get a good score, hey, your GMAT can be waived too. And also, like, just because the GMAT is waivable doesn't necessarily lower the importance of the test. So it's still a pretty good thing if you can say that, hey, even though I know that you have waived the GMAT, I still have a 730 or a 740 score. Okay, so I do want to talk about one really quick thing. Of course, we can't take every single profile that's out there. So here is a link where you can submit your profile. So go check that out. I just put the link on the text box and on the live chat. That's officially where you get support from all of our like expert admission consulting partners. We are sort of running out of time, but I'm going to take just one more profile. So 27-year-old male Indian, 4.5 years work experience, 1.5 years in Cambodia, part of Maersk Global Leadership Program, collaboration with Berkeley Haas. Undergrad, liberal arts, plus MBA in IIM Indore, GMAT yet to take. I think you have a decent profile because you have good names in your profile, but it also boils down to what you really want to do, what kind of schools you want to get into. So I think if you get a 720 through 740 GMAT, I think you'll be in a decent shape because of your international experience. But I would also try to up the GMAT score and figure out which schools you really want to get into. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, unfortunately, you're in the first or second most heavily represented demographic. So it's going to have to be a high GMAT score depending on what school you want. And even for some of the ones that you would hedge with, still going to have to be a fairly high GMAT score. So you're looking, high 700s.
Right. Okay, so I have, before we go, I have two housekeeping things. Number one, check the link that I just posted. If you want to get your profile reviewed, here you go. That's on the screen. On Friday, we are exploring the possibility of a GMAT online video. It's kind of in progress, so stay tuned for that. On Saturday, we're going to look at resumes and essays. So we're going to talk a little bit about what makes a good resume, what makes a strong essay. So stay tuned for that stuff. And then on Sunday, I'm going to talk about top 20 to top 30 programs. I got a lot of requests for those, and I've been getting a little bit of flack that, hey, you only talk about the top programs. What about the other programs? That's a totally valid criticism. And so I'm going to take into that, which sort of tells you that if you have any feedback, feel free to send me feedback, and that's fine. If you have any thoughts, go to GMAT Club and ask Souvik. It's a thread where I'm taking in profiles for exactly this content. But if you have feedback, suggestions, feel free to do that. I'm going to look at that thread and respond today. So all you need to do is to Google Ask Souvik GMAT Club and post your feedback, your suggestions. That's fine. I'm going to take a look at that this evening, so I'll hang out there today. So just a quick recap. Friday, we're going to do an online GMAT video, TBD on what that video is about because it's still moving. I don't want to confirm what it is. On Saturday, we are going to look at essays and resume with Sam. That's going to be fun. We're actually going to look at some of my essays and some of my resume. I'm going to have Sam give me shit for that. And then on Sunday, we're going to look at the top 20, top 30 programs. All right, so that's pretty much it. Sharon, I'm really sorry we're running out of time, but feel free to post your profile on Ask Souvik or hang out on next Saturday. I will be around for sure, but find me on GMAT Club on the Ask Souvik thread, and I'll be there. Thank you again. Thank you so much for joining. This has been great. Thank you again for queuing up. I'll see you guys on Friday. Thanks, Sam, for being here.
See you, everybody.